Lori Hollander.
Thank you for inviting me here to speak today. My name's Lori Hollander, and I've been a licensed certified social worker and board certified diplomat for 31 years in private practice. All therapists go into this field because of some pain they've experienced in their childhood. The true gift of my pain is that it made me a more compassionate person with a desire to stand up for minorities. From my work at Equality Maryland, I have met many transgender people. I've heard about the chronic bias and prejudice that transgender people face. I believe this is because people without psychological training don't understand what transgender means, and we fear what we don't understand. So let me make sure that you understand. And the following information is from the American Psychological Association, and I'm unaware of any other peer-reviewed articles that debunks this. Gender identity refers to a person's internal sense of being male or female. Gender expression refers to the way a person externally communicates their gender identity to others through their behavior, clothing, and body characteristics. Transgender is an umbrella term for persons whose gender identity or gender expression does not conform to the gender they were assigned at birth. The label transgender is not a formal diagnosis. Identifying as transgender in and of itself is not a mental disorder. To qualify as a mental disorder, a behavioral pattern must result in a significant adaptive disadvantage to the person, or the concerns, questions, and uncertainties about gender identity must cause significant emotional distress or disability, which impairs a person's functioning. Many transgender people do not experience their gender as distressing. It is just who they are. It's the minority stress, the discrimination, and the violence perpetrated against transgender people that creates suffering. In 2011, the National Center for Transgender Equality did a report, Injustice at Every Turn, which documented the discrimination towards transgender people. They found that 41% of nearly 6,500 respondents had attempted suicide. Transgender people experience high rates of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, not because of who they are, but because of our unwillingness to embrace and understand them. Transgender people are not dangerous. When that bathroom issue comes up, criminals are dangerous. Transgender people are different, and we're afraid of what's different. The solution here is to educate the public, not to make laws based on fear. So I'm asking you, will you choose to use your gift of pain to perpetuate unkindness or protect your fellow brothers and sisters? So I implore you to be protective of the minority. Let's educate, not discriminate. Please support Senate Bill 212.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Brochin has a question, and then Senator Forehand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You said that gender identity is a internal thing that somebody has. And actually, let me start off this conversation by saying I don't think that people who are transgender have psychiatric problems, and I just think everybody's wired differently. Okay, so I want to start off right there, okay? But you said, my question is a question that I've had concerns with over the years, which is the public accommodations part of the legislation, the way it reads. And I look at gender identity, its definition, and I listen to how you interpret its definition, which is internally how you feel, whether it be a man or a woman, no matter what sex you are. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not concerned about, and I think the whole argument about, that the other side says about, kids getting molested in public bathrooms, that's not my concern on the public accommodation part. My concern on the public accommodations part is the way this legislation is drafted and the way you reaffirmed it in your mind, which is how you see yourself internally, leads to somebody, getting up in the morning and deciding what they are, and I'm just going, by the language, and being at a mall or wherever at a place where there's a public accommodation, and going into and a man dressing up because internally they feel like a woman, whether they've had the surgery or not, which is a much more complicated issue, and I understand that. And whether you want your 9, 10, 11, or 12-year-old exposed to that in a public accommodation. I think it's a troubling part of the bill, and I think the part that's troubling is I don't know how to fix it, but the way you define gender identity, and I see it the same way, is problematic for me as a parent. And I'm not worried about my kid being molested. Okay, I'm worried about somebody who wakes up one day and says, you know what? Look what the state of Maryland just did. I feel like a woman today.
Well, with all due respect, I don't think people wake up one day and feel this. It's an identity that is part of a person's psyche forever, and I really don't think that's going to happen.
But that's not the way the bill is written.
Thank you very much. Senator Forehand, then Senator Raskin.
The other night when we were discussing another important piece of legislation, Senator Kelly made the comment that that she had talked with someone who had, I guess it was one of her friends who was a doctor, who asked about who had been told that the doctor friend was late to an event, and he had delivered a baby, and they said it took them an hour to distinguish which gender to put down on the birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the things that I wonder if you or some of the others could maybe go into more detail about that, because I think the public is confused, and some of us are about this. So,
Dr. Beyer, do you want to address that?
Senator Forehand.
Well,
Can I allow Dr.
No.
Beyer to
I'd
respond?
like to hear the answer to that.
all right. Okay.
Senator Forehand, Senator Kelly made a very impassioned plea on the floor of the House, the floor of the Senate, when the marriage bill was passed. She's absolutely correct. There are hundreds of what we call intersex conditions. Some don't have any bodily evidence of difference. Some may be completely internal, as it is for transgender people, where you really can't tell. You have the genitals of one sex, but you have a brain sex of the opposite sex. But there are conditions where the genitals are considered ambiguous. And it might not be an hour. It can take days or weeks to determine what the sex of that child will be and what its gender identity will probably be. Sometimes you can't even determine that. There are cases, there's a condition called androgen insensitivity syndrome, where you have a Y chromosome, which is what most males have, but because you have a genetic defect, the testosterone that the body produces that makes a fetus male is not seen by that developing fetus. And that fetus becomes, for all intents and purposes, a female. No reproductive organs, and Y chromosome, undescended testes, and feels completely female, looks completely female. So you cannot look at somebody out in a mall and say, oh, I don't want to be seen with that person. That person may have a Y chromosome, or that person may have male genitals, but is presenting as a woman. One's gender expression is protected by the Supreme Court and by now the 11th Circuit down in Alabama, Florida, and Georgia, as far as we're allowed to express our gender in any way we want. But medically speaking, there are hundreds of these conditions, and there are many people out there who are now beginning to stand up and express their own desire for full civil rights, regardless of what their genitals show. When we go into a bathroom, nobody looks at anybody else's genitals. Even in the men's room, guys don't do that, right? That's the code. So,
Right.
and in the women's bathroom, we clearly
Thank
do
you,
not do
Doctor.
that.
Exhausted. We have another question here from Senator Raskin.
Well, we lost the train, so that's okay. That's fine.